Greg Edwards is running in Pennsylvania's 7th district, and he is a progressive candidate. He's a Just Democrat, and apparently the Democratic establishment is not in favor of Greg Edwards. So, Greg, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, it's good to be here, Cenk. How are you?
Great, great. So there's a lot to talk about in your race. There's redistricting in Pennsylvania. There's Democratic primary. There's the people who you're going to go up against. Is the state of the district itself. But first, let's start with the big news. Let's talk about what happened to you recently. So, how was it that the Democratic Party got you a message that they didn't want you in this race?
Well, we had found out through a variety of sources that they basically wanted the front-running candidate who had raised the most money, who happened to be a candidate of color, to take another position, to not run for Congress. And so that came back to our campaign through a variety of sources, actually from DC and throughout the nation. I got a couple of phone calls. And then there were some folks on the ground that said, they're basically trying to get you out the race.
So, Greg, did you say you raised the most money in that race on the Democratic side?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the fourth quarter, we outraised through small dollar donations all of our Republican and Democratic opponents, and that was something that we actually didn't expect to do. But we have an incredible ground game, and there's a lot of momentum, and folks are really excited about the campaign that we're running.
So now, the Democratic establishment gives the excuse every time, well, look, guys, you got to have money to be competitive and it's all about the money, but Greg has the most money, so that excuse is eliminated. Greg's a pastor, he's a civil rights activist. I'm just going to read you a quick list of his awards: the NAACP Man of Vision Award, the Peace Pilgrim of the Year Award, the Community Development Award by the Allentown Human Relations Commission, the William Gray III Leadership Award, and the list goes on and on and on. So if it's not your record of achievement, if it's not that you're not progressive enough, nobody can make that argument, and it's not the money, what is it? Why do you think they wanted you out of the race?
Well, I think, Cenk, that they wanted to clear the path for a more establishment-like candidates. I think that they were thinking that even with the redistricting, the candidate of choice from the establishment would be kind of a Republican-like or a Democrat-like candidate. And we were raising money and building a ground game that this area has never seen. And we were doing it really without the help of the establishment. And I think that that was intimidating to the powers that be. So.
And Greg, was the message to you subtle, and maybe there was a misunderstanding, or was it clear?
Well, they had called us to a meeting, and my staff and I attended, and they had stated they wanted to know how much money we raised, and they wanted to know about our staff, and they had asked who we were using, and if we were using any of their political consultants. And the reality is that we weren't using any of their political consultants. And then it got back to me from one of our local officials and some folks from DC that they were seeking for me to run for a lower office for state senate. So the gentleman came back from DC and basically said, yes, that's true. Though we didn't ask you directly, we were wanting to see if you would be willing to run for a lower seat.
Yeah, well, that seems pretty clear. Now, one of their stated reasons is, well, we got to get a Republican-like guy to be able to win in that district. But we had redistricting in Pennsylvania. So what's the state of your district today?
Well, I mean, we are so excited. The district is now ungerrymandered. It's all of Lehigh County, all of Northampton County. We have an urban district that has Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, parts of southern Monroe County, including Stroudsburg, East Stroudsburg, lots of colleges. It's a much more urban district, and the profile of the district in terms of the racial demographics certainly change. About 25% of the district now is about people of color, and so we're really excited. This district was gerrymandered, and it wasn't continuous, and the demographic wasn't the same. And now we're not just viable; we are really the candidate to beat, and we're really excited about that. This really looks like the people have an opportunity to elect equitable representation that reflects the community.
And I know that that district went from an R+4, meaning the Republicans have an advantage by about 4 points, which, by the way, in a wave is not very much at all, and certainly within contention. But now that it's ungerrymandered, it's Democrat +1. So there's no reason why a progressive shouldn't win that race. And I'm going to get to your policies in 1 second, Greg. But one more thing about the state of the race. It looks like the establishment attack against you might have backfired again. You just picked up an endorsement yesterday, didn't you?
Sure. So we picked up an endorsement from the Working Families Party of Pennsylvania. We also picked up today an endorsement from SEIU, their state council. So not only have we outraised all of our opponents on both the Republican and Democratic side through small dollar donations, through, I think at this point we have about 5,000 folks that have come on board and really believe that democracy needs to happen now. But we also have more endorsements than any other person running in the race. And I think that that's really important. I mean, I think it's important that progressive organizations are now putting their money where their mouth and their vision and mission is. And we are super excited about that.
Yeah, and by the way, I just want to be clear to the audience too. These are not endorsements from establishment politicians who I personally couldn't care less about, but it's SEIU, Just Democrats, Progressive Change Campaign Committee, Common Defense, Working Families Party, the Collective PAC, Women's March Pennsylvania, etc. Real progressive grassroots groups that are getting behind Greg Edwards' campaign. So, and there's a reason why. You are the most progressive person in the race. If you're a Just Democrat, that means you don't take any corporate PAC money. That means you're uncorrupted. And so there's a lot of logic there. So, but tell us a little bit more about your policy positions.
Well, I mean, let me just say this. I think it's hard to run a political campaign and try to become who you've never been. And certainly healthcare is a priority. We think a single payer Medicare for all is the only way to go. That's not going to break the back of small businesses and also not bankrupt families. We have families all throughout the 7th Congressional District that are really hurting because of their lack of health care. Certainly in Pennsylvania, we rank number 48 in terms of our educational outcomes, and we believe universal preschool and debt-free college is the way to go. College is no longer a pathway to prosperity. It's really, kind of a pathway to poverty when folks leave college and they're shackled by this debt of exorbitant high student loans. And certainly, $15 an hour, which is what I'm advocating for as a minimum wage, a federal standard, $15 an hour, which is $30,000 a year. In Pennsylvania, our minimum wage is $7.25.
Jesus.
And that's our minimum wage. That doesn't include the waiters and the waitresses and the folks that are working in hotels and the folks that are bringing folks food. I mean, $7.25. And so we're saying at least we need $15 an hour, $30,000 a year. We don't think that that's asking too much. And I think now is the time for us not to ratify the extremist agenda of Donald Trump and the Republicans, but now is the time really for us to be bold and to ask for the entire pie. Because after all, we've paid for it.
Yeah, and look, I've gone over and over on the show about American workers' productivity versus their flattening wages. And if wages had kept up with productivity, the average American worker would make $17,000 more per year, which is just stunning. And to back up what Pastor Edwards is saying there, that $7.25 for if you work 40 hours a week the whole year is $15,000. No, that you can't live on $15,000. That's why your message is resonating, because people know that if you work your tail off, getting $30,000 a year is not too much to ask for. Asking for health care so your family doesn't die is not too much to ask for. But one last thing about policy, you have a unique position on gun ownership. What is that?
Well, I mean, we believe that, first of all, we need to reestablish the federal ban on assault weapons. We need universal background checks that can't be remediated across state lines. I believe we need home safety checks for any person that wants to own more than one firearm. But I also believe that every person who wants a gun should have that gun registered, and also there should be an insurance policy and coverage of any person that wants to own a firearm. Once gun ownership is monetized, watch what happens to these situations that are happening across the nation in terms of guns being on the loose and lost and stolen and controlled. Once the insurance companies and that industry gets involved into helping monetize gun ownership, I think there's going to be more prudence in terms of who gets guns and who doesn't get guns.
Yeah, it's not quite the Chris Rock strategy of $1,000 a bullet, but but it makes a lot of sense. If we have to register and insure our cars,
yes.
Why shouldn't we register and insure a killing machine that's a gun? And you might need it to defend yourself, and there's a lot of rural parts of Pennsylvania, I understand that. But if you can insure your car, you can insure your gun. So I want everybody to have the links for Greg Edwards as well. Edwardsforpa.com is the website. All these links are really easily clickable in the description box on YouTube and in the comments section on Facebook. So just go down there, check out the website, check out his policy positions. Volunteering is the most important thing because that actually gets you victories and people-powered campaigns. But if you can't volunteer or you live somewhere else, a donation for people who don't take corporate PAC money makes all the difference. Greg Edwards, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Cenk.